Sports Law 101 is an initiative of the Sports Law and Policy Center, where experts from the field cover contemporary sports law and policy issues through discussions. Today's discussion is on the trending issue of NFTs and sport. The speakers for the session are Mr. Pruthvi Rao, co-founder of Zebi, a full-stack blockchain company that provides blockchain-based solutions for risk management and internal governance. Zebi is in the process of launching an NFT ecosystem for cricket in India. We have Mr. Abhinav Shrivastava, partner with LawNK. Mr. Abhinav heads the corporate and data practices at the firm. He regularly advises clients across gaming and esports, e-commerce, e-healthcare, and technology-enabled services on privacy and data protection, intermediary regulation, personality rights, technology licensing, and commercial contracting. Our moderator for this session is Mr. Nithin Sasikumar, editor of Beyond the First Order, a daily newsletter published by the Can, which is focused on insights and implications of significant events from India and Southeast Asia. Mr. Nithin is a graduate of Cass Business School, London, and co-founded Investography, a Bangalore-based financial wellness company. Welcome, speakers, to our session. I would like to request the viewers to keep their cameras and mics switched off for the entire duration of the session. If you have any questions during the session, please type them in the chat box on Zoom, and our panelists will try and address some of your questions at the end of the session. I would now like to hand over to Mr. Nithin to take forward this discussion. Over to you, Nithin.
Thanks so much, Vani, for the warm introductions for all of us. And to all the participants that I can see here, thanks so much for joining in on a fairly late Friday evening in India, and from people who are joining elsewhere. I guess it's multiple time zones as well. And this is going to be a very exciting session as well, because if I look at my own Twitter feed, for example, the only thing that I see most of the time are NFTs. And I think we've got two wonderful guests to answer all the questions that we have today, Pruthvi and Abhinav. Thanks so much for being here again, Pruthvi. Right, so we'll get right into it. We've got an hour. Like Vani said, I think we'll take questions at the end of an hour. We leave around 10 to 15 minutes open for Q&A. So keep things ready. I don't know if the chat option is open, but you could drop in your questions into the chat box as well, so that we can take them towards the end. So let's get right into it, and I'll get started with a slide. Since obviously I work in a journalism publication, it's only fair that I start off with a story about NFTs, right? A story of sorts. Especially since we're talking about NFTs and sports over here. If any of you on this call or this webinar has heard of Evan Mobley, you can type in a yes on the chat box, or you can, if Abhinav or Pruthvi have heard of Evan Mobley, you can raise your hands or say that you have. But Evan Mobley, in case that you haven't, Evan Mobley is actually a rookie player in the National Basketball Association in the US. Which means that he was picked this year by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the draft, and he's only 20 years old. But why am I starting off with a story about him when we're talking about NFTs? Obviously, there's a connection to sports. Now, usually when an NBA player announces their intention to get drafted into one of the teams, they usually opt for a press release. Or of late, they've even started doing posts on a very popular publication called the Players Tribune. Mobley, on the other hand, decided that he's going to choose an NFT to make his announcement. And I think that is the first time that an NBA player has actually ever done that. Now, it included not just the digital asset, but there were also 2 signed jerseys that he was giving out and 2 tickets to a game in the future with the chance to meet him. So that's like a slight introduction of what's happening in the NFT space, at least in the world of basketball, right? And this is where the intersection of sports and NFTs are. Now imagine this situation where in India, and let's assume the Indian Premier League is the NBA of India. Now imagine a situation where an uncapped player in India is doing a similar release via an NFT, right? So we'll cover some of these questions on what, and since this is a one-on-one session, we'll get into the basics as well. We're not just going to be talking about the technicalities, and we'll get a bit into how NFTs work and about the regulations surrounding NFTs as well, right? So let me get right into it, guys. And the way I look at NFTs is essentially like old wine, but in a new bottle. Like you had sports cards back in the day that were traded. But the problem with sports cards, obviously, is that there is a limited number of people who can really authenticate the rarity of sports cards. And NFT over here is supposed to solve for a lot of those issues. So I'm going to package two questions here and get right to Pruthvi. Right, Pruthvi? Let's define what a non-fungible token or an NFT really is for everyone over here to start off with, and then we'll get into the rest of the questions.
So first of all, thanks, Nithin. So what is a non-fungible token? So first of all, in the whole world of crypto, and NFT is crypto, there are two parts. So one is something like Bitcoin, which we've been seeing for a long time now. And Bitcoin is akin to currency, and they're called fungible tokens. Fungible tokens are nothing but any form of money, for example, where 100 rupee note is equal to another 100 rupee note. Okay, or you can do arithmetic. If you can do arithmetic operations on it, it's a fungible token. You can add, subtract, divide. Okay, but there are some assets that are there in this world which you cannot add or subtract or divide. Okay, they are fundamentally unique and they cannot be exchanged for anything else. And these are called non-fungible tokens. Okay, so that is the fungibility aspect of it. And so yeah, it could be a piece of art. It could be a trading card, like you said. It could be a piece of property. It could be a certificate. It could be anything, literally, right? So any asset that cannot be directly exchanged for another asset is a non-fungible token. Okay, so that's one part of it. The second part of it is very interesting. You mentioned trading cards, and yes, trading cards have always existed. In fact, art has always existed for millennia, right? So people collected paintings and sculptures and everything to do with art. But after media became digital, there was no way to collect it. Okay, so how do you collect a tweet? How do you collect a TV episode? You really can't do that. So NFTs actually are the technology that allow you to collect digital media. So you're absolutely right. It's exactly like trading cards, but it's for digital media. So in fact, the whole trading card culture died down since the internet came, since digital media came about, because who signs autographs? They tweet, right? So, but you can't collect a tweet. But now NFTs make that possible. So that's. I hope that's a fair introduction to what NFTs are and why they have become relevant now. So for the first time in history, digital media is collectible. It never was. So right from 100 years when the radio started, all digital media was transient. You could only consume it, you could only transmit it, but never collect it. NFTs make collection possible, ownership possible.
Right, fair enough. I think that was a very interesting point where you said now even tweets can be made into NFTs. Right now, tweets are the new form of autographs in this world, probably.
Yeah.
But let me talk a bit about the technology behind. If you can elaborate a bit more on the technology behind what makes an NFT possible, right? Because how do you? I've seen a lot of examples being drawn to the Mona Lisa, right? Where you have one original Mona Lisa and then you have multiples of it that can be made, right? And you say that to authenticate, and I mentioned that very briefly as well, right? To authenticate the originality of an NFT. And you said it's a form of crypto. So there is the blockchain element to it as well, right? So if you can explain a bit more, Pruthvi, about how the blockchain for this.
So fundamentally, blockchain is nothing but a distributed ledger of records. So it's basically a way of sharing between everyone in the world who owns what. In the case of Bitcoin, it was money. So let's say it was 1 Bitcoin and I transferred 1 Bitcoin from me to you. So everybody records that, okay, 1 Bitcoin was transferred from Pruthvi to Nithin, and therefore it is irreversible. And everybody in the world knows that this happened, right? So for fungible tokens, this was there for a long time. It was only actually 3 years ago that non-fungible token came about. Non-fungible token is exactly the same thing. It is nothing but, it's like your sub-registrar's office, which records your property data. It is also a public office. It is also a place where ownership is recorded, but we know the sub-registrar's office is corruptible, whereas the blockchain is not. So that's the fundamental difference. And so it's simply a public registry of sorts that is shared, and anybody can validate it very, very easily. So that's fundamentally what a blockchain is. So NFTs also work the same way. It is basically the title to, and by the way, an NFT is not an asset itself, it's a title to an asset. Okay, so, and that's an important point. So an NFT is basically the title to an asset, and that title is now publicly available on the blockchain. And I can own it, I can transfer it to you, and you can transfer it to somebody else. Exactly like how the sub-registrar office works.
Fair enough. So let me bring in,
like I said, instead of a single authority, it is distributed. That makes it the immutable part of it.
Got it. So let me bring in Abhinav here to address the part about the ownership of the asset, or the legalities behind it, right? So Abhinav, so who can, and maybe Pruthvi, even you can jump in if you have something to add, but who can now create an NFT? Is it mintable by anyone? And if so, or even if not, what are the rights that are associated when someone is getting into the NFT world?
Yeah, so when we're addressing the question of rights, it's very important to understand what ownership of an NFT means. Now, we're dealing with digital assets here. Digital assets, by the very nature, are easily replicable. They can be reproduced, they can be adapted fairly easily. So when you speak of ownership of a digital asset, you're not getting rights in the IP of the asset itself, in the art itself. But what you're getting is a serialized version, an authenticated serialized version of that art as an individual, effectively like an equivalent of a copy, an authenticated copy of that art is capable of ownership through the NFT. So the NFT is a record, as Pruthvi said, it's a title deed. So it's a serial number that records and encapsulates this copy of this license copy and authenticates that. And within the NFT ecosystem, in order to create demand, there's also some amount of scarcity that's built in. That's what creates it. So, for example, in Top Shots, you have limited editions that come out. The editions can vary from 40,000 all the way to 42. And that creates demand for that asset, because only that number of NFTs of that particular art, moment, or even a meme or video will be ever minted. And that's a commitment that's been made by the platform or the content creator. So who can create the NFT? For that, you have to do an abstraction of rights, where the underlying content itself, for example, if you take broadcast content, the broadcast itself would be owned by the producer of the broadcast. So in case of a sports event, it would be the governing body that's organizing it. That governing body licenses out to a broadcaster who further rebroadcasts it. In some cases, the broadcaster might be the owner because they've undertaken the production by themselves, especially in younger leagues, where the organizer outsources that entirely to the broadcaster. The broadcaster is the one that's installing the equipment, undertaking production, making the edits, making it fit for distribution. In that case, the broadcaster becomes the owner. So it's very important to understand who has created that particular record that is being minted into an NFT. Now, this is just one layer. Below that, you also have to consider the people who are within that particular art. For example, if the recording itself, like for example, you take Dhoni's winning 6 of the World Cup. In that case, the NFT moment is personalized and related to Dhoni. And if you're minting it and selling it as Dhoni hitting a 6, then you're using his personality rights, which apply independent of the broadcast rights. So then any commercialization of that, for example, by minting it as an NFT, also requires some amount of consent and contracting with Dhoni, because he has to provide his personality rights in order for you to commercialize both the broadcast as well as his in embedded personality. So that's where it gets interesting, especially when you're looking at sport-based NFTs and the monetization of archival content.
That's also very complicated, right, Abhinav? So let me try and break it down a little more, right? So you spoke about, and let's talk about sports and Dhoni over here, for example, right? The game-winning 6. So now the BCCI probably owns the archival footage for that. And there's also the personality of Dhoni that's associated with it. Yeah. As a viewer, can I mint an NFT GIF or a meme based on that and sell it on platforms?
So the moment you create a GIF, there's some amount of fair dealing and fair use that applies. That allows you to non-commercially distribute it in order to spread the message. But the moment you commercialize it, the scope for fair use reduces. So the moment there's a commercial angle to it, especially in India, because we have a different standard from the US, because the scope of commercialization reduces, then you have to get the relevant consents in place, because the content itself would be owned by the BCCI. That's the broadcast content. But within that, because the number of personalities that participate, they also have their playing contracts. The playing contracts will allow you to broadcast that content. So effectively, there's a waiver of personality rights in relation to the broadcast of that content. The question is, how widely is that waiver framed? Because then if it allows for commercialization of that content, for example, if rather than through NFTs, if it is contemplated that the same content will be used to create highlights packages and they will be independently commercialized, or any other form of commercialization, then it's possible for the BCCI to use that in order to mint NFTs, because that's also part of that commercialization. So it comes down to the playing contract as well, and what rights have already been granted.
Understood. So Pruthvi, I don't know how much you want to speak about what you are doing as a company in terms of cricket and the NFT.
Yeah, so I just want to add some flavor to what Abhinav just mentioned. So one is NFTs fundamentally are titles to deeds, but what you can sell is up to the artist actually. So for example, what he mentioned about NBA is collectibles. It's like trading cards. So they are limited edition license collectibles. But there is obviously a lot of art that is fundamentally signed off completely, right? So Beeple famously sold his piece of art for 69 million, right? So that was not a limited edition collection or anything. That was the actual piece of art that was put up on the Ethereum blockchain and sold, right? So it's up to the artist whether they want to sell limited edition replicas or whether they want to sell the actual media itself. So NFTs again are titles to the underlying asset, and you can define what that underlying asset is. That's point number one. And second thing is, yeah, in terms of, we were supposed to launch in June, by the way. And the reason we have not launched is there is so much legal gray area here, right? And I heard Abhinav use the word broadcast many times over. And yes, so far everybody has been using broadcast rights, but this is a completely new class of license. It's a completely new class of monetization. So they don't know where it falls, right? So every single board is stuck and they don't know what to do. Because in the UK, you have the English and Wales Cricket Board and the Players Association that is there. In India, there is no separate Players Association, right? So you can monetize your assets independent, which is why you see so many endorsement deals. But fundamentally, it's right now between the board, the franchise. Let's say if it is RCB, inward RCB also has some rights to it, right? And then there is a player. And then there is the agency of the player. So we all know big cricketers have agents. So agents are also part of the contracting process here. So of course, there are multiple stakeholders that are there. And yes, so what we are doing right now is, of course, one is, first of all, there's a lot of education in what we're doing. So half the discussions that we do are what are NFTs and how it's game changing and how all your media rights can be sold, not broadcasted, right? So broadcast is a separate license. So for example, if a contract specifically mentioned broadcast, they're very clear, saying that, okay, yes, so therefore we know that what we're going to do now is out of that scope, right? Whereas if it said digitization of all, commercialization of all digital assets, then it's fairly omnibus clauses that have been there in the agreement. And that is when we're getting stuck in some of these arrangements that are there. So yeah, so what we have done is our platform allows to monetize all. Okay, so at the end of the day, blockchain also is about incentives. So the idea is that if the network is reasonably incentivized from all sides, the network will carry forward on its own. Okay, it's completely decentralized, right? So that, for example, in the Bitcoin space, there are miners on one side and there are users on the other side, right? So if there is enough incentive for miners, they will mine. If they don't, the whole network will fall off. So yeah, so there is an equilibrium point, and that is why you see the price fluctuation that keeps happening from time to time, right? So in terms of what we are doing is exactly the same. At the end of the day, everybody has to be incentivized. I mean, let's take NBA as an example, where initially they never thought it would be so big, by the way. I mean, they thought it will be like trading cards and it's going to be like maybe 5 million, 10 million in sales, right? And it suddenly boomed to be $1 billion business. And suddenly, so in the case of NBA, it was a license acquisition deal. And they realized that they sold their license for very, very less. So they completely renegotiated the deal in April, right? And again, players were paid next to nothing. And so none of the players tweeted about it. So nobody said, hey, go buy my tweet. So let's take Dhoni's 6, for example. If Dhoni got no proceeds out of that sale, in fact, there have been cases where people have publicly gone and said, don't buy this. Okay, I'm getting nothing out of it. So Dave Chappelle recently had this episode, right, where something he signed up for 20 years ago came about now. So anyway, so the point is, if it is not incentivized, it will not commercialized well. So obviously, everybody in the ecosystem has to be well incentivized in whatever fashion. So of course, our platform allows for that. And that's what, these are some of the learnings that we've had over the past couple of months. And yeah, we will have to see how this evolves. Actually, none of the boards have still taken a call. They're all still waiting to see where the chip will move.
Just to add to Pruthvi's point, it's also quite interesting in the football space in the UK with this thing called Project Red Card, which is pushing for, which is basically players reclaiming their image rights from their respective boards. So that's also getting a lot of traction in terms of the impact of that on digitization of iconic moments within, for example, the FA. And so the future is moving towards having the players also as a stakeholder, having the players union.
They should be. I think they should be. Otherwise, it will not work eventually, right? So you'll have a lot of upset players who are not adding to the. At the end of the day, the value of an NFT is purely intangible, right?
Yeah.
So which means that if there's a video of Dhoni hitting a 6, if Dhoni doesn't tweet about it, the value of that is 0. Yeah. If Dhoni tweets about it, the value of that is $1 million, right? So, and if he doesn't get a share of it, he's not going to tweet about it, right?
Yeah, so getting that buy-in of players is important, which is what Man City did when they launched the One Series. So as part of the One Series, they had 4 different NFTs that were created, each with different edition sizes. Like Champion Celebrate was a single NFT, while they also had player cards, like a collage of players.
Correct.
Which had all of the players buying in, all of the players tweeting about it and celebrating that moment. So they did it very elegantly because they involve players in the conversation, which is important.
Yeah. So actually, it's very interesting in the sense, what is the value of an NFT? And again, this is very interesting. We can maybe do a separate session, but the value of an NFT is purely social. It's exactly like how collectibles are. It is pure. It's a lot of emotional value that is there, and it is largely social. So which means Don Bradman's bat will have a lot of value because it has a lot of social context attached to it. Whereas my bat wouldn't sell even if it was given away for free, right? So yeah, so therefore it is important. And again, we live in the social world, the digital world. So we'll have to see how this evolves. It's very, very nascent. The whole industry is 3 months old, right? Interestingly, we worked with ICC way back in 2018 when the first wave happened. Of course, that time nothing happened, but right now it has become mainstream, and we'll have to see how this whole space evolves over the next maybe 6 months. I think in 6 months, I think everything will be clear.
Right. So let me try and drill this down to the basics, right? Since we are talking about, again, we keep coming back to Dhoni over here, right? And you have yourselves as a platform, right? And you are speaking to not just for broadcast, right? For all sorts of media, right? You're speaking to the boards, right? So now, who can essentially create this NFT? Let's take Dhoni's game-winning shot, for example. Is it you as a platform which has decided to tie up with the boards that can create the NFT? Is it the boards that can create the NFT? Is it Dhoni on his own? Is it his management agency, or is it all go back to the ICC, which is the premium body?
So there are 2 broad things. So one is, of course, right now the original content owner is the one who can mint the NFT. Okay, so if it's in the case of Dhoni's match-winning shot, it is the BCCI who owns the rights, and there are terms like negative rights and all that are used, but yeah, basically it's the one who owns the rights. After that, it's about incentives and how you sub-commercialize that with the player, everybody else that is there in the chain. So that is one part of it. But broadly, there are again 3 broad categories of content owners that we are seeing right now. So one is, at the end of the day, it's content that sells. So one is the player himself. So let's say, so Dhoni himself might have a photo of him, which he might want to sell. And there are fans who might want to just buy Dhoni's photo, right? So players themselves. Second is franchises. So let's say it's like RCB or MI or any of these franchises that are there. And then, of course, the board. So by the way, franchises don't own any content themselves, except for, let's say, their endorsement deals, their locker room videos, or some whatever. So team photos that they might have and stuff like that. And then there are boards which have on-ground play, actually video broadcast rights and the content itself, right? So there are three different categories of rights owners. And obviously, so yeah, we're speaking to all of them. And individual players are the easiest to sign up because it happens quickly. But obviously, any other franchise or a board, they're stuck in a lot of loopholes actually. And boards, of course, I think will take another 6 months at least, or 3 months at least, to kind of understand and settle down how they want to commercialize all of these arrangements. Because like Abhinav said, suddenly a lot of players have come back and said, hey, I want my own image rights and stuff like that. But yeah, it doesn't work that way, right? It's not that straightforward.
Yeah, it all comes down to negotiation. So just adding on that, with the B6, there are multiple entities that are in play even within that. So the ICC is the organizer of the tournament. They produced it. They are the content owner for that. The BCCI, because Dhoni is wearing a BCCI kit and the BCCI emblem is clearly visible on his helmet as well as on his jersey. The BCCI's trademark rights also apply.
Yeah.
Dhoni's personality rights of the bowler.
Yeah.
So there are multiple rights that apply in this when you're looking at who is the content creator. The other important thing is, especially because the value of the NFT is both social as well as from the scarcity that you generate, is
correct.
These archival rights can also be granted on non-exclusive licenses out. So broadcasters might have a non-exclusive license to continue to use that for their promotions. Like the next World Cup, use Dhoni's 6 winning shot for the promotion of that. So if they can independently create NFTs, you potentially have 2 separate entities that can digitize content depending on the extent and ambit of the license. As he said, if it's an omnibus license, then it opens up the field entirely, which means that your own licensing conditions could devalue the potential monetization of your NFT. So it's very important to consider not just who is the content owner, but who all have been granted the right to use and digitize this content. And bring the buy-in of everyone in, all the stakeholders in this, in order to just ring fence potential legal liability and risk.
Yeah. So in fact, we have defined it as creator. So it is the creator, it's not the owner. So we have said that you're the creator and everything, they indemnify everything else to us, right? So
got it. So Abhinav, since rights clearance. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that the creator essentially has to get the rights clearance in order to mint and
that's right.
monetize.
Right.
That's right.
And I've been
so fan art is
reading a lot about how sports people can really use NFTs as a way to bypass the middlemen, right? And monetize their own personality and everything else they put out, like a tweet they put out. It could be a video of them just walking around that they put out, right? So from a legal standpoint, Abhinav, and looking at contracts that are already in place for a lot of these sports people, does it mean a renegotiation of all these contracts? And are boards and sports people really equipped to really understand the nuances of a lot of these things? How do you see this playing out from a legal standpoint, really?
So there's both a legal element as well as a relationship element. The legal element really boils down to what is the contractual clause. How specific is it on what is permitted, what is reserved? So, with image rights, you generally have these permitted activities and these that are reserved with the player. So effectively, you set out the boundaries of what can be done with the image rights. So depending on how wide that boundary is and whether it contemplates digitization or creation of individual moments for monetization, that's a question of on the contractual side. But at the relationship level, it's very important to get the players buy-in, because fundamentally you still will rely on them in order to monetize the asset.
Right.
At relationship level, they can still, if your contract is sound and permits this, but you don't get the players buy-in, then you're effectively shooting yourself in your own foot by launching it without the involvement of the players. And this is something that the NBA has faced in its negotiations with the NBPA, the Players Association. So in the broadcast rights, a certain amount of revenue goes to the NBPA. That's negotiated within the collective bargaining agreement. And this is a feature of all American sports. So even when, for example, wearables were being introduced for the NFL, those wearables, there was a negotiation involving both the NFL Owners Association, the Franchise Owners Association, as well as the NFL Players Association. We'll see similar negotiations playing out even when boards and professional leagues are looking to launch NFT.
Pruthvi, did you want to add something earlier before I interrupted you?
We were on fan art. So fan art is something that is again, if you go to OpenSea or Rarible, there's a lot of fan art. So you will see a lot of photos of Tendulkar, and you'll see of Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. And fan art is being sold today just out of fan value. And again, I don't know, maybe Abhinav can comment more, but it is happening today. While I understand that Messi can go and object, people are buying it. Right? It's like a painting of Dhoni. I mean, who owns the rights to a painting of Dhoni?
So that's why personality rights in India are not as well defined. We're still dealing with judicial precedents, and it's seen as an aspect of privacy rather than an independently commercializable a proprietary right. The same way that you would treat IP. So that's why with personality rights, specifically in India, we're sort of in a slight gray area, where some amount of commercialization is possible without the usage of the name or usage of the likeness. So we're dealing with the gray. So definitely a developing area.
So let's assume I'm an artist.
So crypto itself is gray.
Let me bring in the artist angle here, right? And I want to sketch Dhoni, and I'm an artist and I want to sketch Dhoni and sell it on an NFT marketplace. Am I opening myself up to potential legal disputes with the BCCI even?
So in this case, it will be less a matter of legal dispute with the BCCI, and it will be more related to Dhoni because that's his likeness that is being monetized. So it also goes down to, as an artist, the amount of originality that's been incorporated, the amount of how differentiable it is from Dhoni as a player, as an identifiable player. For example, if you're sketching the winning moment, and it's not very clear. I mean, everyone knows that it was Dhoni who hit the six, but if it's just the winning moment and it's a sketch that doesn't clearly identify him, then there's a different scheme of law that applies. Then you are the content creator. And so there's lesser risk. But the moment
I just take it away from the digital marketplace, Abhinav, and I just talk about this in the non-digital or the physical marketplace. And if I were to sketch it and sell it as art, does that have the same implications?
So yeah, you just broke up there. Sorry.
Okay, so I was just saying, let's take the same thing that's happening in the digital realm, where artists might be creating likeness of sports stars and selling it as NFTs, and let's take that into the physical realm, where real tangible art is being made and sold. Is it the same laws that apply in terms of identification or personally identifiable traits and us monetizing or something?
The same principle will apply. So the principle of law is really about who has about the extent of control that the player or the celebrity has over his or her own image and persona. So that same sort of principle does apply. And we've seen this play out, for example, in the use of Amitabh Bachchan's voice in an ad, which is a clear commercialization that's relying on his goodwill. So the test really is that when you've created this and you're trying to monetize it, what is being monetized? Are you monetizing your art? Are you monetizing the essential goodwill attached to the player, the underlying personality rights? So that's the test that applies even in the physical realm.
Got it. Pruthvi, if I can just jump to you, because on your website also it says that NFTs and it says fan tokens, right? And you touched upon crypto earlier. So I just want to understand a little bit more about fan tokens here, especially since I think it has been made slightly more popular today because of Messi's move to the Parisian football club, right? And he's receiving payments in fan tokens, if I'm not wrong as well. And there was also an instance where there was media reports which said, as soon as Messi's announcement was made, the price of those fan tokens really jumped up, right? So What is really the difference here between NFTs and fan tokens? How does that play out?
So NFTs is a very, very generic term that is there, right? So fan tokens are a way to nicely productize it. So it's like saying there are stocks in the stock market, and then there are derivatives, options, calls, everything that are there, right? So there is actually only one fundamental thing. Technically, it's just an NFT, but you can create many, many different uses out of it, right? So selling art is one of them, selling collectibles is one of them, fan tokens is one of them. In fact, so in 2018, we did for tickets. Again, I don't know if anyone went to the actual Pro Kabaddi League matches that happened, but all those tickets were NFTs. Okay, so if anybody has it, that is of some value today. Okay, so again, at that time, they didn't know what NFTs were, but we did NFTs. So tickets anything that is fundamentally exchangeable for value or tradable for value can be an NFT. How it can be used?
So it's not just digital here, because you're talking about the physical ticket as well that was used as NFTs, or is it just the digital version of the ticket as an NFT?
No, it is a physical ticket, but attached to, it's like a QR code, right? So it is attached to an NFT, right? So obviously, I mean, the market was way too early. In fact, even now the market is way too early just for digital tickets. But yeah, it was attached to an NFT. But to answer fan tokens, so yeah, fan tokens represent the same. So fundamentally, the whole of crypto is what it's the same. It's like the .com revolution. It's as disruptive as the .com revolution. So it's called Web 3.0. But there is one fundamental difference, which is it is attacking the economy below it, not just the technology that is there, right? So every single way in which we transact in that economy will get disrupted. So fan tokens are one way by which club ownership is getting disrupted. Okay, so collectibles is the way by which collectibles are getting disrupted. So, like I said, so tomorrow, I mean, your player management contracts, pretty much anything can happen through this economy. And actually, again, I'll use the word economy loosely because that is what it will disrupt.
Got it.
Just to add to Pruthvi's point, it's also the potential applications of NFTs, even in for physical goods, is endless. So it can be used for identity authentication. Your current public key, private key mechanism for authenticating transactions can be shifted up into an NFT. It can be used to authenticate collectibles, like physical collectibles. Like I said, the ticket had a QR code that attached to an NFT. The same thing.
So physical assets we are completely avoiding as of now, because physical assets are currently covered under commodity trading laws in most jurisdictions. So the moment you get into physical goods, you can't really trade. You can only sell once. And again, there's tax and there's so many elements that are there. But yes, whenever the dust settles on the legality of it, they can eventually disrupt. Like I said, the fundamental transaction layer of it will get disrupted, and how that transaction is being done.
And with fan tokens specifically, so fan tokens are just a means of engaging the fan. So you're creating the equivalent of a digital share, which is being issued by, let's say, PSG or Leeds United. And it's allowing the fan to participate in decision-making for like an event. Like how do you want to present Messi? People who own the fan token can vote. Do you want him to do this or that? Do you want to, what sort of music should play in the back? So they're allowing fans to be involved in decision-making at an event level. So as a promotion. And fan tokens are also fungible in the sense that you can split them, you can redeem some of them for fan merchandise that's being sold by the club. So the key difference is that fan tokens, you're creating the equivalent of a share in order to encourage participation.
You're right. It's a fancy title for a share.
Yeah. With NFTs, it's a serialized unique asset. Like a fan token, one fan token can be exchanged for another fan token. It's the same value.
Right. But shares come under various acts and regulations, right? And that is how people can actually influence voting decisions at companies, whether it's management, whether it's just decision
shares also have greater rights. They have rights in management because they're being issued by the company in order to raise capital.
Correct.
There are securities regulations that apply that regulate trading, issuance, and the amount of disclosures that you need to make.
Correct. But so let's take that over here to fan tokens, right? And since it's digital and I don't think there's any real regulations governing it yet, right?
Yeah.
And clubs like PSG say that it is, fans who buy it can influence the decisions of the teams. Let's assume that as a fan of PSG, I buy fan token to try and influence the decision of the team. But at the end of the day, I find that the decisions are being taken by the team management and there's hardly any use of the fan token. Is there any legal precedents or anything for me to take PSG to court or anything else for that matter?
In the absence of an overarching regulation specifically for the field, if you look at your base contracting law, that govern all relationships. Contract law applies to online, social, or offline, all transactions where there is an exchange of there's an exchange of goods or exchange of services, and there is some amount of agreement on the principle of it. So with contract law, when you're issuing a fan token, it'll come with a lengthy contract which sets out the representations and expectations that you have from the fan token. So that will really determine, in the absence of law, the contract becomes the proxy for law. And that sets out what rights and expectations you can have from the club. So for example, the PSG fan token will list out the participation rights. In what events or what instances do the holders of the fan token have a right to vote? What is the extent of that vote? Like for example, in shares, you can have shares with differential voting rights. One share can be equivalent to 10. So if you have 2 or 3 different classes of fan tokens, like a gold, silver, or platinum layer, what does it mean in terms of voting for that particular event? So all this has to be spelled out in the agreement. In the absence of agreement, it will go down to the representations, and that's really where the dispute comes. And at the time when you made the sale, what were your representations? How did you sell it to the buyer? What representations did you make to the buyer? Do you say that you'll be involved in team selection decisions? And if you don't offer that, then that means that a material representation on the basis of which the sale was made has been breached.
So PSG has always been community owned, by the way, from the beginning. They were never owned by a single media magnate or anything like that, right? So it was always owned by, I think, about 10,000, 20,000 people who all bought. There are many clubs like that. I mean, I think even in cricket where they're owned by communities. And I think so that experiment really, really worked well and it paid off well for them. To the extent they bought Messi, right? So for the first time. So that's the power of crypto. It's going to fundamentally disrupt the way we do business, actually.
And how do you see this evolving in India, Pruthvi? Since you're dealing with this and fan tokens, have you, in conversations with any of the sporting bodies, have you seen interest?
Yeah. So fan tokens is something we have not yet launched. So again, fan tokens is a loosely used term to do anything. So it could be engagement, like Abhinav said. It could be for rights management. It could be something. So you could just buy a dinner date with a fan token, right? So which is also possible, and that can get auctioned, right? So the main things that you can do that we're currently experimenting in India. First of all, I mean, I must say that the regulatory climate has kind of cooled off. And we are hoping that it will be positive going forward. Obviously, there's a lot of action that you're seeing. And definitely, I personally believe that India should not get left behind in this race, right? So it's massive. Coinbase has already gone IPO. And again, while China keeps banning stuff, we know that 40% of all Bitcoin mining is still happening in China. 50% of, and again, the belief is that more than 50% of the money that is floating around the crypto market is Chinese. Right. So yeah, if India tries to lock itself out of this economy very badly, and that's not a desirable place to be. That's my personal belief. But yes, I think we're seeing the brighter side of things, especially in the last couple of months. And we should very quickly. And of course, we are hopeful that it will happen. And a lot of these things will continue to happen.
Right. And how exactly do you participate now in transactions involving NFTs in India or even outside? Is it through Ethereum? Is it through other cryptocurrencies? Can it be done through your regular cards? How does it work?
So different platforms offer different things. So OpenSea, for example, is built on Ethereum. So you can transact only in Ethereum. So the one we are building is built on something called Cricket tokens. Cricket tokens go live this Sunday, actually. And you can transact only in Cricket tokens. Okay, and that's the way it works. And
sorry, but how do you get the cricket tokens?
You can buy it from any exchange that is there.
Okay.
So there's an on-ramp. So exchange, so it's like how you buy Ethereum, right? So you can buy Ethereum from any exchange. So similarly, you can buy cricket tokens from any exchange. And once you buy it, then you enter that economy, that world, the world of Ethereum. And you can do many things, like buying collectibles is one of them. So the way you can think of it is there's a world which is Ethereum, and there's one shop which is OpenSea, which is selling collectibles. And you use Ethereum in that world, right? So right now, I mean, there are many ways to do it. So NBA Top Shots, for example, is built on a token called Flow. So they accept Flow tokens, but they also accept, now they've started accepting US dollars. They've started accepting, again, their US is a primary market. So they also accept Bitcoin and Ethereum and every other cryptocurrency that is there, right? So yeah, the interaction will be mixed for some time, but even if you're buying in US dollars or Indian rupees, on the back end, technically everything is still built on Ethereum or whatever, in our case on cricket tokens, yeah.
Got it. Abhinav, if I can pull you in here from for a legal perspective, since India is still in a very gray area with regard to the regulations around crypto, right? Where do we stand now in terms of crypto regulations, in terms of NFT regulations? Are there separate regulations that are looking at NFTs standalone? What's the landscape as you see it?
So the RBI had a knee-jerk reaction to cryptocurrencies, and their reaction was to ban it outright. It's highly speculative, and which didn't really have any rationale behind it. There was no understanding of the market, and so it was challenged, and the ban fell apart in the Delhi High Court. So after that, there's been news that the Commerce Ministry is looking at cryptocurrencies to understand how they function. But within that, what a cryptocurrency enables is some amount of transacting. Those transactions still come within the frame of Indian law. So if you can find equivalents, like the same sort of relationship in another context, then you can regulate the transaction that the cryptocurrency enables through equivalence. So that's typically how even regulation in India has functioned. So what the law does is just enables, for example, the IT Act enabled recognition of online contracts. It came in 2000 when online contracts, especially click-track contracts, were the norm across the digital world. What it did was it added a legal recognition layer to what was otherwise considered to be enforceable, and was in some instances enforced even before the court system. So the law in this respect always acts as a laggard. And what it does is it recognizes the relationship that's created by that act, by that conduct of two willing and consenting individuals. So the way I see it is, on the recognition side, there are a number of base acts, like for example, the Sale of Goods Act or the Transfer of Property Act, which all apply and govern relationships that are essentially in the offline context. But they have been applied to even online transactions in order to recognize them and give them some legal validity and recognition. So, for example, click-wrap contracts have been found to be enforceable, but with certain limitations that come from standard form contracts that you find, like in terms and conditions attached to a physical receipt. So the same principle has been applied to click-wrap contracts, and we've seen that. Similarly, if an NFT is treated as the equivalent of a physical good, it's capable of ownership, it's capable of being sold, offered for sale and being sold, then similar tests that have been applied, for example, for the sale of software products in physical CD form, but ultimately it's a license to the software product that is being transferred, will allow for recognition of even trades in NFTs, of the NFT itself. So you can go backward and recognize the NFT and the version of the artwork that's underlying the NFT.
Understood. So if I can ask a very blunt question, and it's not regulated, but it's also not illegal, right? So which means that if I'm involved in the purchase and sales of NFTs, it will not be an illegal transaction.
So it won't be illegal. It's not banned currently. thanks to Delhi High Court judgment, it's not banned. Like even with the Delhi High Court judgment, to take that example, what the RBI did, what it did was it barred trading in cryptocurrency. So the ownership of like purchasing cryptocurrencies was something that exchanges couldn't allow you to do. So your payment gateways weren't allowing you to process transactions which allowed you to purchase Bitcoin. That was the effect of the ban. If, however, using our liberalized remittance scheme, which allows for purchase of goods online, you buy the same cryptocurrency over an exchange in Singapore, there's no restriction in India. So the prohibition doesn't prohibit that, doesn't prohibit the ownership of that coin. And in this case, doesn't prohibit in any way the ownership of the token, the NFT.
And how does the taxability for this work out, Abhinav?
So the taxability is, the way GST works is that we have close to 1,300 entries that are very specific, and GST has to be read very strictly. Within that, there's also a residuary layer, which covers both goods and services that are not otherwise covered within this. Now, software products is one of the entries that's listed. So software includes services, products, anything that involves some amount of technology being licensed or software application being licensed and offered. So one way is that an NFT, the license element and the tradable license element can be brought within the definition of a software product. If that's not possible, then the residuary layer applies, the residuary clause, which is 18%, which sets out 18%. But the question with this is enforceability. Because with crypto assets, the ownership and title lie on the blockchain. So the blockchain system itself operates on trust and validation across the entire ecosystem. So in this case, investigation and determination of trades, even the publishing these trades becomes a bit of an issue. And this is something that tax authorities across the world are facing, from Singapore to even the UK. Because the UK, at least a year back, had released a paper to understand how the cryptocurrency market works and to understand what income and capital gains means in the crypto market, because they treated each coin as a capital asset. And so once you exchange that coin, there's a certain amount of gain that's made. That they were treating as income. That was their proposal within the white paper.
Got it. And since you mentioned blockchain and trust, I pose this question to the both of you in terms of the security of non-fungible tokens, right? I mean, there have been lots of reports about artists having fake yet verified profiles on platforms such as Rarible, right? And their art being sold through this. Especially in an age where deep fakes are just going to become more common. How do you essentially deal with the security of NFTs and everything else that comes with creators minting their NFTs?
So I'll take a shot first. So yeah, obviously this is a massive problem, right? So in fact, a lot of, especially in an open market like OpenSea or Rarible, where you can also go and mint whatever you want. I mean, they have a hell of a problem on a daily basis of takedowns. Okay, so someone reporting that, hey, this is unauthorized, take it down. So they keep taking down. So it is a well-recognized problem in the industry. Like we talked about me uploading Dhoni 6, okay, without his consent, and he's sending a notice and we taking it down. Well, technically you can't take it down because on the blockchain is already there, right? So the NFT at least exists permanently, but you can only take down the listing on the marketplace. That is one. And secondly, in terms of the way we are solving it, at least as of now, is that while we are architected to be a marketplace, we are currently onboarding only selectively. So only selected people can come and mint. Okay, so it's like how Amazon, onboards sellers. Okay, right. So there's a KYC, the diligence that is there. It's a very similar process. It's not just anyone can go and sell on Amazon, right? So there is a diligence process that is involved, and that's similar to what we're doing right now. So the sellers are vetted, and therefore, and again, backed by these agreements that they have enough representations on the assets that they're creating, and blah, blah, blah. And so yeah, so therefore, it is fairly understandable that you will not see the problem of fakes. So NBA Top Shots, for example, is one seller, many buyers, right? So they 100% don't have a problem of fakes. So it's a slightly modified version and of what we are doing, where there are multiple vetted sellers and many buyers.
Got it. One question on
that. But yes,
the
problem continues to exist.
Got it.
Since it's from the seller identity mainly.
Right. Pruthvi, you said that it remains on the blockchain, but it's taken off from the marketplace. Since it still remains on the blockchain, can trading still continue to happen?
Yeah, trading can continue to happen on another marketplace. So all of blockchain is decentralized. So I mean, it is possible that 5 years down the line, somebody will build a gray market, okay, for NFTs that are abandoned. They might have some value. We don't know, right? So these are all abandoned NFTs that were created now and down, but they permanently reside on the blockchain. So you can list them in your exchange for free, and people might buy it.
Got it. Interesting. Abhinav, do you have something to add?
Yeah, counterfeiting is something that every industry with scarcity faces. So in the sports memorabilia space, in the jersey space, you will see counterfeiting. So it's to be expected even from the NFT space, because fundamentally we're essentially creating the equivalent of collectibles, and we're creating that scarcity. So that is an existential risk, and how it's managed. You can take best practices from across platforms. So Collectabilia and people who trade in collectibles, or even auction houses. The due diligence that they do is something that can be expected in order to build that trust, because the entire NFT ecosystem is relying on trust.
Got it. All right. So before I open it up for people's Q&A, I'm sure there'll be questions coming in. Let me ask at least in my mind, what is a very futuristic question, right? With regard to how this entire thing will play out, right? And I want to introduce the metaverse in this, right? I mean, that's another word that has been thrown around a lot, primarily because of Facebook and their objective of the virtual world really being where we spend our entire time in the future, right? So I was reading this and I came across one company called Crypto Kickers, right? Where they do these digital, the NFTs of sneakers. So the founders of this company, apparently they bought a digital plot of land worth, I think, around $10,000 US. On that plot of land, they plan to build a digital showroom. In that digital showroom, they will showcase digital sneakers that they plan to sell as NFTs. How do you see this really playing out, the metaverse concept and digital NFTs really playing out for sports merchandise? Or even let's say, for example, the metaverse is allowing people like us to play a digital FIFA licensed game. And I'm the controller. I have a player, but I create a moment out of the player and I decide to mint it and sell it as an NFT. How do you see this really playing out, both from a legal perspective as well as, is this really possible perspective?
So yeah, metaverse is the way to go. Of course, metaverses have been experimented before. Pokemon being a very great example of a metaverse, where you can go and again, Pokemon did it very well because it was connected to your physical world where you had to run around and catch Pokemon, right? But yeah, all video games are essentially metaverses. In fact, you will see every day today that video games are fundamentally rewritten in crypto economies. So yeah, you go and collect stuff, you do things, and we know how big gaming as an industry is, right? So this will continue to happen, and we will, in fact, if you read the preamble of our white paper, so basically, at the end of the day, Facebook is a nation. We have identities and passports to come in and out. But though it has all the essential properties of a nation, it does not have its own currency, right? Which crypto saw. In fact, Facebook wanted to launch its own currency called Libra, which it will, by the way, sometime in the future. So essentially, we are traveling between these worlds, and we will end up spending more and more time in digital worlds as we come along, and that's what we call a metaverse. And yeah, so there will continuously be, now that the economies of these, so one of the reasons why metaverses could not explode before was there was no way to transact in these metaverses, right? Whereas now it has become very, very easy to do so. In fact, now the highest played game on an iPhone is the Roblox. I don't know if you know Roblox. Roblox is essentially like Minecraft, but you can actually trade stuff, right? You can actually go create stuff, you can build games. And yeah, so that will continue to happen. The other interesting element that will happen is about how they will be driven by the public in general. So it's not, I mean, again, central authorities will play lesser and lesser roles, and the participants of the ecosystem will drive it. And actually, that's what, again, blockchain changes, right? So,
Abhinav, any thoughts? And
yeah, so just to add, with the metaverse itself, any form of digital engagement is through a platform. That platform by itself is a metaverse in a sense that it's an encapsulated world. If you're playing a video game, you're immersed in that video game's created world. Therefore, you are participating in that. Now, the metaverse constantly interacts with the physical world. For example, your Twitch videos, which you're putting up, are all recording from that metaverse that you're independently publishing. Now, the centralization of authority would just be in the architecture of that metaverse. So the platform that's creating it would determine, at least at a base level, what expectations, what a user or participant can or cannot do. After that, it'll be driven entirely by the users. And that's, as Pruthvi said, that's what blockchain enables. Because by enabling contracting between individuals without the involvement of the platform creator, the base architecture, you're essentially allowing for relationships to be created. And these relationships will have the same validity, so long as they have the fundamental tenets of a contract. So your base laws that govern relationships and recognize relationships in the physical world do still have some impact and do recognize transactions even in the metaverse.
Got it. I think this will be very interesting times for all of us, and especially, you know, both of you are at the forefront of it. Pruthvi is creating the things in the crypto universe, and Abhinav is going to have to deal with all the legal implications that come with transacting in the crypto universe, right? So
Pruthvi is creating the product, I'm creating the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
I'm sure this will be.
So, by the way, work from home has added massively to the metaverses. Okay, so we're all sitting at home. The best way to interact is through metaverses. Yeah. In fact, Zoom is a metaverse.
Can I create an NFT of this?
Hangouts is a nation by itself.
We should now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, like if you look at Google and Hangouts, where you can literally search using someone's ID, using someone's Google ID to interact with them through Google Hangouts. So that itself is a metaverse on its own.
Abhinav, so if I'm creating an NFT out of this, legally do I have to deal with you because you're the host?
Yes, no, not just me. So you have to get my consent and Pruthvi's consent. There'll also be a revenue share involved, although I don't see any revenue coming out of this.
Exactly. That I was actually coming to that. Who would buy it? I mean, maybe we should do a free giveaway and see who takes it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I can bully some of my colleagues to buy it.
And on that note, I shall open it up for participants. If you have any questions, this is a wonderful chance to learn from the best in the industry. Do send in questions that you have, and I'm sure Abhinav and Pruthvi will be more than happy to answer it over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. I don't know how you're taking questions, Abhinav. Are people sending it to you directly, or
it's on the chat window here.
A couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is there a way to create NFTs without entering into agreements with both broadcasters? So, I mean, as you said, it comes down to the abstraction of rights. So if you're creating, like, if you're a junior player and you're creating a cricket NFT of your own training videos, then there's the only image rights, the only stakeholder involved is you. So you can create that. But the moment, if you take a recording from, let's say, a match and try to turn that into an NFT, then there are different rights that apply. There's trademarks, there's broadcast rights, there's individual player rights. So all of them will apply the moment you try to essentially monetize someone else's broadcaster content.
Abhinav, can I ask a follow-on question to that? Because I don't see any questions in the chat. Something just interesting popped into my head, right? So, so obviously there's the India-England cricket series that's going on, which as Indians, we don't really want to talk about at the moment, but still. And there's a segment called School of Cricket, right? Where people send in the videos of them playing, and, you know, you have experts commenting on those videos. And it's being broadcast and, you know, on Sony Live or whatever else, right? And let's say I'm someone who sent in that video. And I'm trying to create an NFT of it being, or let's say an expert giving their comments on it. I'm assuming that it won't be just mine alone now, and since it's being broadcast, there's a legal element involved there.
The video itself will remain with you. The video, if you create an NFT just for that video of that moment of you playing the ball, then that video immediately you can mint that because you are the exclusive content owner. So the moment that video is incorporated into another to create a derivative, then each person who's contributed to that has a certain stake in it. And so if you want to mint an NFT using that, you have to involve, all of you have to come together. Because both from a contracting side, as well as you have to be in agreement about what are the terms of the NFT. Are you releasing it as a 30 version NFT? Are you only release one version? Those are very important considerations. And then because you're also dealing with smart contracts, which allow for a royalty distribution on each trade. You also have to build in those terms within that to set out what amount of revenue share is flowing to each of the constituents of that NFT. And that is built into the code and smart contract.
Got it. So since I can't see any of the messages on the chat, and I think you can, maybe.
I think the next question was answered. Will NFT affect player likeness licensing? I think this was answered already. NFT possesses value in exchange, not in use. What is the economic financial viability of trading NFTs in the long term? So there are two parts. Actually, it's a very interesting question. What is the essential value of an NFT? And it's like, what is the essential value of art? So art fundamentally does not have utility, or at least true art does not have utility, right? So what is the use of Mona Lisa, right? I mean, why would I pay $100 million for it? So art, of course, therefore, is not about utility itself, but it's more of the intangible value associated with it. But so it is interesting. So NFTs will get traded exactly like how art was getting traded, which means people bought art. I mean, before only the rich bought art, they would buy these huge collections of M.F. Hussain's and Andy Warhol's, keep it in their lockers in private basements, and then sell it, right? So everybody does that. But now NFTs have actually made that whole movement fundamentally, for everyone. So you can buy art for 100 rupees today and sell it tomorrow, just like how Jeff Bezos sold some painting for $5 million, right? So yeah, so therefore it is a financial investment in some form or the other, just like how art is. Utility is a very interesting subject. UNFTs or utility NFTs are something that we are currently using, by the way, so which is to solve this problem. So again, while India, again, in cricket is mostly India, and we don't know if India does not have a trading card culture, India does not have a collectible culture, right? Which is there in, let's say, an NBA or an MLB, for example. So one of the ways we're solving this problem is by making them utility NFTs, which means we're running contests saying that, okay, so if you have, let's say, if you have a what do you say, something like fantasy gaming, where you can have a set of NFTs in your kitty and they actually produce value in some form that is related to real world events. Okay, so or bounties in crypto, they're called bounties in general. They can be challenges. So, or in gamification, metaverse is another very good use of utility NFTs. So will it still command the same commercial value 10 years down the line? I mean, really don't know. I mean, we don't know how long Mona Lisa will be valuable, right? So maybe 5 generations down the line, people won't even care. So yeah, and again, there is a lot of social value attached to NFTs, which means, in fact, we were actually grappling with this problem around which player. So in the collectible world, the older an asset, the more valuable it is. But in the NFT world, the newer an asset, the more valuable it is, right? So while I can have a photo of Don Bradman, Dhoni 6 is a lot more valuable than Bradman's bat, right? So we really don't know how. So I think in the NFT space, value will be significantly linked to the social context of the NFT itself, and not just the fact that it is rare and it is old, like any other piece of art is. Is it possible to enable buying and selling of NFTs using rupees? Yes, we are currently not doing it, but I mean, I'm sure some platform will come about So I think WazirX already does it. You can buy NFTs against rupees.
And you have exchanges.
What is the market?
You can purchase the relevant coin using an exchange like CoinSwitch, Kuber or something.
Yeah, there are many. So there are many exchanges today. We are listing on BitBNS, by the way, one of the Indian exchanges. So can you buy against rupees? Maybe sometime in the future when the regulation settles. Probably people will attempt. People are not daring to attempt these things today. What is the market cap for the token?
It also comes down to the gatekeeper. So the manner in which you transact online is you're using a payment gateway which is licensed by the RBI, and they have very strict licensing conditions of what they can and can't do. Speculative activity is something that is specifically prohibited. So naturally, because they stand to potentially lose the license, they take a very conservative view of permitted activities. So until there is some clarity there, until there's some loosening of these strings, I think we'll still be reliant on offshore exchanges.
Yeah. Next is what is the market cap for the token? Wait this week, watch out for announcements. Maybe we can share, follow Cricket Foundation on Twitter. Everything is happening there. You will know. We already have a buyer for this NFT, Nithin. Okay, so we can contact him. He's not quoted the price, but at least we have a buyer.
Let's offline and contact him.
Yeah. So what do you think is the impact of NFTs would have on broadcasting and TV rights? So NFTs today are mostly about licenses. At the end of the day, they're titles to deeds. So while I don't think NFTs today is going to do anything, again, because see, today blockchain cannot handle the kind of data that broadcasting requires, right? But eventually, in fact, we're already in talks with somebody else for building licensing of digital content on the blockchain. Okay, so it's again fundamentally an NFT. It can expire, it can have value, and what it does is it does price discovery very, very well, as against you calling 10 people.
And on the media rights side, the impact of NFTs on broadcasting and TV rights would be that it would be an expanded category of media rights. Like, what does it mean? When you're granting media rights, it will also include potential monetization of snippets. So that is
the tricky part is NFTs don't expire, broadcasting rights expire. So these are perpetual rights that you're giving. So it's slightly different. And again, we don't know how that will be handled, because broadcasting rights, I can give it to Star for like 5 years, then give it to somebody else. Whereas NFT is not like that. So once you give it, it's over. That's it. It's there forever.
Yeah, but in that respect, please, broadcast rights are like event-based. So you can grant broadcast rights
for
a specific event. And the broadcast rights for the next event would be another set of media rights are being granted. So you can also mint for the content generated from that specific event. You can mint and grant rights to further monetize. So basically outsourcing responsibility for identification and minting to the potential partner.
There's one last question, which is the context of the government likely banning crypto can be transacted without having an exchange. So first of all, we need to fundamentally understand that NFT is crypto. Okay, so I've had this conversation with many people where they say, hey, you know what, I want to sell NFTs, but I don't want to be involved in crypto. And it's ironic actually, because NFTs are crypto, which means you're selling crypto, but you don't want to buy crypto, which is very strange. But in terms of the government likely banning crypto, it doesn't matter. So at least what we're launching right now is domiciled in Singapore, where it's perfectly okay and in fact regulated to some extent. I think, of course, you might not be able to buy it from India, but there might be other places for you to buy it from. What if someone steals your NFT? Okay, the beauty of an NFT is nobody can steal it. It's like Bitcoin, unless of course you lose your private key, right? So everything in the crypto world is dependent on your private key. If you misplace it's like the keys to your locker. If you misplace the keys to your locker, you are bound to lose it someday, right? Cricket, it's CRIC that's getting listed. Is the name? There's another question, sorry, that I just read.
Is that it for our questions?
Yeah, I think that's all.
Wonderful. So if there's nothing more, thanks so much, Abhinav and Pruthvi, and thanks so much, Sports Law and Policy Center, for really doing this one-on-one session on NFT and sports. I'm sure for everyone who's stayed back on a Friday evening from India, it's been fairly interesting. I hope it has been very interesting, in fact. And I take it that the video will be up on YouTube as well, Abhinav, right? So if anyone wants to revisit it at some point, I'm sure they can.
Yeah, definitely. Vani will just give us a closing remarks and where we can find the video up on YouTube with the SLPC.
Perfect. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining in today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Pruthvi, Abhinav, and Nithin.
Thanks, Vani, for the introduction.
Thanks for taking your time off for this session. It was a very insightful discussion on NFTs and sport. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us today as well. So this brings us to the end of the 5th session of Sports Law 101, and we look forward to hosting you all again soon. Thank you.